Now let's have a talk about definite integral, and I think this is one of the best application of Riemann sums. So we call this definite integral the Riemann integral. And if f is defined on a closed interval a, b, and the limit of the Riemann sums over partitions delta, so this delta is usually the norm that we have. So if you take this limit, or we take all the sum of this particular interval, all the values that are possible in between this interval. So if the norm or the length or the width of that change in the variable itself, so kung meron tayong x, that's the dx. If meron tayong y, that's the dy. So if the distance between these two values would approach to 0, meaning as this dx or dy approaches to 0, alam naman natin na yung number of partitions, which is n, is actually increasing infinitely. So if that's the case, then and if it exists in a value that is converging, then we can say that that function is integrable or Riemann integrable, and this is denoted by this function. So whenever you have a function that is given by this f of x and then dx, of course the variable of integration, that is integrated between these two values a and b, then you have to write the antiderivative and then put some bar wherein you write the lower and upper limit on that bar. So this equivalent to expressing that antiderivative by taking the antiderivative and substituting the value of b to that, and then pag nakuha mo yung sagot, subtract mo lang yung f of a. So I'll give you an example later. And then the limit, we call this the limit, the definite integral. So that's the Riemann integral of f from a to b. So again, yung a natin is lower limit and then yung b natin is upper limit. Now, we can also say that an equation is observed from an indefinite integral, while for a definite integral, then we can obtain an exact value. So, in short, ganito lang yan. Pag sinabi natin indefinite integral, then we're talking about the antiderivative in its equation form. Yung mayroong f of x plus c. Now, if we're talking about the definite integral, then we're talking about the exact value of that definite integral given that we have a limit, or that certain function is bounded by the x-axis, x equals a and x equals b. So to give you an example, let's have the very basic example lang, just to give you an idea of how this integral works. So assuming that we have this integral, let's say we have the integral of let's say we have 1 over x plus x squared. Okay, so yan lang yung basic natin. And then dx. Then I want to integrate this from, let's say, 4 to 10. Okay? So with this, sabi dito sa ating expression, you have to take the antiderivative of that. So I'll be integrating this. The antiderivative of 1 over x is the natural logarithm of x. And then for this one, we have x squared. So we apply the power rule. So that's x cubed over 3. Okay, so pag nasulat mo na yung antiderivative niya, you add some bar here. Okay, so yung bar na yun, lalagyan mo yun ng lower and upper limit. So that is 4, 10. So ang difference ito sa indefinite integral is that we're not writing plus c anymore. So hindi natin siya isusulat, but we'll be writing this bar and then lower and upper limit. So ano ba ibig sabihin itong bar na to? So this translates to ito, substitute mo to ngayon dun sa values of x's mo. And then subtractan mo ngayon ito ng mga values na to upon substitution to your function or the antiderivative. So I'll be doing that. So for 10, we have ln of 10, okay, plus 10 cubed all over 3, and then minus, so minus ln of 4 plus 4 cubed all over 3. Okay, so you should be able to get an exact answer here. So the antiderivative of 1 over x plus x squared dx from 0 to, from 4 to 10 would be this particular value. So, kayo na lang yung mag-calculate nito, yung exact value nito, and that should be your value for your definite integral. So, therefore, in short, we're able to obtain an exact value from the expression and not the equation itself. Kasi ito na yung equation eh. And for definite, you have to compute for the value itself of your definite integral. Okay, so I hope it makes sense na for our definite integral. Now, let's have some properties of our definite integral kasi hindi naman pwede na wala tayong sasabihin na properties. And by the way, kung hindi nyo masyado nakikita tong ating figure, ang ating definite integral, we're talking about the area under the curve. So, ito yung under the curve, no? And then this one is, actually, naliko na yung ano. Ito yung A natin, and then this one is B. So, bounded by the x-axis itself. So, ito yon. So, you have to take the area under this curve. So, ganun lang naman siya. That's why it becomes negative when we're talking about the area which is already above the curve. So, yun lang naman yun. And then, let's head into the properties of our definite integral. So, again, if we have a function, of course, yung f natin is defined. Wala tayong discontinuity. So, at x equals a, so if you try to integrate that from a to a, so meaning parehas yung ating lower and upper limit, so you have to expect that you don't have any area. So how is that possible? Kasi kung halimbawa in-integrate mo and then this is the strip of your a only, so can you see any area here? So wala yung area kasi your lower and upper limit would have the same values kasi your antiderivative would just also be the same. So for number 2, if we have f integrable from a to b, then this is also true for this function. So if you have f of x dx and then you have b to a, then pag tinake mo yung kanilang limits, then binaliktad natin yung limits nila, then that is equal to the negative of that certain exact value. So ano ba ibig sabihin nun? Kasi what if you have the same equation, okay? And then, ang ginawa mo ngayon is kinompute mo tong area na to from, kinompute mo yung area pero inuna mo tong upper limit dun sa baba for lower limit. So, yung f of b natin is always expected na mas malaki siya sa f of a, di ba? Kung ganito lang naman yung curve natin. Pero, of course, kung nauna mo yung a sa b, so magsusubtract lang naman sila. So, you have to expect na, in this case, magiging negative na yon if your a is, of course, inuna mo siya kasi the operation is subtraction. So, yun yung concept kung bakit siya pwedeng ibalikta rin natin. No? Now, the additive property states that if you have f integrable into 3 closed intervals, so meron tayong a, b, c na interval. So, from a to b, okay, meron siyang halimbawang gitnaan natin ng isang certain value to letter c. No? So if you try to integrate this one from a to b, so you just have to take the area under this a to b, correct? But if you try to make this c, so it makes sense na kapag kinuha mo tong area na to from a going to c, and then of course from c going to b, then it's just the same thing, but inad mo yung dalawang area na yun. That's just the area under f from a to b. That's why that's the additive property of your interval. So, pwede mo siyang i-add actually, knowing that you have the same value of your f of x. Now, if your f and g are integrable on a to b and k is a constant, then the functionality kf and f plus minus g are integrable on a, b. So, therefore, we can say that you can just factor out your k and then multiply it to the integral of your f of x dx from a to b. Now, it also holds true for this particular scenario wherein you have two functions. You have to integrate those from a to b. And then, of course, pwede mo naman silang paghiwalayan kasi yung area natin is ma-add lang naman siya. So, you can just take each of them and then try to integrate them individually. So, para lang tong property, linear property natin ng ating mga integration na ginagawa. We can actually separate terms and then integrate sila individually. So that holds true for your definite integral. So for the inequality naman ng ating mga integral, so una dito is if you have an integrable f and it is non-negative, so you have to expect na yung iyong magiging sagot is greater than 0 or at least equal to 0. Kasi non-negative yung ating function. So, in short, kung meron kang slope, it should be increasing. No? So, pag in-expect mo na increasing slope, you have to obtain a value that is positive. Now, if f and g are integrable in the closed interval, so I'm talking about two equations now, no? And f of x is less than or equal to g of x for every x in AB. So, in short, kung i-graph natin tong f of x and g of x, so, for every x, mas maliit yung ating g of x. So, parang nasa baba itong graph. For example, meron kang ganyan na curve for your f of x, or let's say g of x. So this is g of x. So you have to expect na yung f of x at all intervals should be less than. So mas mababa siya, no? So ganyan yung scenario. So in short, if you want to integrate that, that should always mean that if you take the antiderivative from a to b, that should always result to a lesser value than g of x. So that makes sense kasi, for example, this is ab, okay, and then ab to. So therefore, yung area lang nito is itong portion na to. But if you try to take ab dito sa g of x, diba, this whole area would be its domain. So that means na mas mataas yung makukuha mo laging value for g of x as compared to your f of x. Okay, so now let's head to the last three properties. So for the first one, we have the definite integral of odd and even function. So if you have an even function and you try to integrate that between the positive negative limits of that certain function, then you can just say let's just integrate that from 0 to a and then multiply it to 2. So ano ba yung reason ba't ganon? So for example, maggawa tayo ng isang even function. So ang one good example ng isang even function is a parabolic function, no? Let's say we have this one, okay? So let's say ito yung y equals x squared natin, diba? Knowing x squared siya ay an example of even function. So if you try to take, for example, ito yung negative a mo, and this one is positive a. So if you try to take the integral of this, so you just have this area. But can you see the symmetry under this curve? So in this case, kung symmetric sila, you can just plug out 0 here, 0 to a, diba? And then just multiply it to 2 kasi yun yung magiging area as well. Instead of you integrating from negative a to positive a, you can just take this side, diba? And then multiply it to 2 kasi they're just the same. So that is the concept of even function. But how about if you have this odd function? So for example, I have odd function y equals x cubed. So this is a very easy odd function. So, or we can use x, for example, para mas madali, y equals x. So for example, if I try to graph this, and then I need to take this negative a, so this is negative a, and then this is positive a. So therefore, I need to find the area under this curve. But this one, we can find the area under this curve, but above the curve. And remember, sabi ko nga, pag meron tayong area above the curve, that becomes negative area. And this one is positive. So it makes sense that this triangle has the same area, but of course, this one's negative and this one's positive. So it cancels out, kaya meron tayong 0 for odd function. Now, any kind of function that is neither even nor odd would not have this property. So wag niyo expect na halimbawa, uy, ano to? Even function to, no? I mean, uy, function to pero hindi siya even nor odd. So wag niyo tong gagamitin tong gantong equality. That's just strictly or exclusively used for even and odd function. Now, paano ba mag-check kung odd or even? So remember, pag even function, if you let your f of x, and I mean if you try to find your f of negative x, that should still be the same, f of x. But if you try to make this f of negative x and your result is negative of f of x, that is negative nung buong equation original, then this one is an odd function. But if this is like this, kapag nakuha mo yung original function, pag ni-negative mo na, like x squared, so that means na that's an even function. Okay, so I hope it makes sense now, though review lang naman tong odd and even function. It's just that remember this, kapag magkapares kayo ng magnitude of your limits, and then ang iba lang sa kanila is your sign, then you just imagine if it's even or odd. If it's even, you multiply it to 2, integrating from 0 to a, and then if it's odd, the answer should be 0. Okay, so now let's proceed with number 7. And when in number 7, it says that if you have a function of interval 0 to a, so that is the expression of the antiderivative, so you can actually use your constant here and then subtract x from that, and then you should be able to get the same result. Now to prove this equation, let's have an example, no? So let's take the integral of 0 to 5 from 0 to 5, and then we have, let's say, x squared plus x dx. Okay, so simplihan lang natin, no? Now, if you try to integrate this, the answer should be x cubed over 3 plus x squared over 2. Now, we need to integrate this from 0 to 5, and the answer should be around 5 cubed over 3 plus 5 squared over 2. Kasi yung 0, magsi-0 lang sila. So, minus 0, which gives you this answer. Now, if you try to do this a minus x, this becomes the integral of 0 to 5, and then this becomes 5 minus x squared plus 5 minus x, and then your integration variable of integration. Now, if you want to integrate this, there's no need to expand this because this is just an extension of the power rule. So with this, let's integrate using power rule. So we have 5 minus x. This becomes cubed over 3, but make sure that we use the negative sign here because that is negative 1. And then plus, this becomes 5x minus x squared over 2. Okay, integrated from 0 to 5. Okay, so if we have 5 here substituted to 5, this becomes 0. So that is 0 plus 5 times 5, and then minus 5 squared over 2. Now, if this is 0, this 2 becomes 0, but this one is actually minus negative 5 over 3 cube. Okay, so that's it for this case. And if you try to evaluate this further, we have 5 squared. So we have 5 squared minus 25 over 2 plus 5 cubed over 3. So if you try to make this or solve for this 5 squared minus 25 over 2, so it should give you the answer, which is equal to 25 over 2 as well. So that is 25 over 2, so plus 5 cubed over 3. So this answer from this expression is just the same as this one, correct? So with this, it is proven that this equation from number 7 is correct. So hopefully na-guess nyo yun. Basta meron kayong f of x, you just have to add or incorporate your value of a, then subtract the whole function itself, and then you should be able to get the same results. Now for the last one, if you have a function of interval a, b, okay, and then this f of x is given in this form, then this is also true, a plus b minus x. Now remember, kapag kasi ginawa natin is tinake mo yung upper limit and then inad mo siya, I mean sinubtract mo yung x from the upper limit, then alam naman natin na yung maging result nun, if it's 0, then it's just the same thing. Pero kapag two limits na siya, so that is true na for a plus b, which is the sum of the two limits. So ito kasi is parang a plus 0 yan, minus x. But syempre, yung 0 hindi natin siya isasama, kaya naging a minus x na lang siya. So remember, kapag meron kayong limits, you can always incorporate that on your new equation, and then you should be able to get the same results as from your given. Now, in some problem solving, I'll be trying to incorporate these two rules na pwede natin siyang magamit para pag i-integrate natin. Kasi especially dito sa sinabi dito na property 7 and 8 exclusively simplify tedious computations, especially for trigonometric functions, in finding the indefinite integral. So later on makita nyo kung ano ba yung uses niya, and then how it is used, especially when we're dealing with trigonometric functions na medyo complicated na, no? Okay, so without further ado, let's head to the problem solving here na. Now let's have the first example for our definite integral. So ang kailangan natin gawin is to integrate this 1 over x dx from 1 to 5. So again, the first procedure, or the first of the process, is to find the antiderivative of the expression. So in this case, since I have dx over x, the antiderivative is the natural logarithm of x. This is integrated from 1 to 5. Okay, so based on this expression, we could say that our answer would be the natural logarithm of 5 minus the natural logarithm of 1, which also gives us the value which is simply equal to the natural logarithm of 5, because this is actually equal to 0. So this is the expression. So kung mapansin nyo, this is your f of x, and then evaluated from a to b, tas maging equal siya sa f of a minus f of p. So basically, this is what is written on your handout na general expression ng ating integral of f of x dx from a to b. Okay, so let's proceed to the next one. So hindi ko muna buburahin itong 1 um, just to compare our answers. So for this one, we have the integral of -1 to this should be -5 to -1 kasi based on the Cartesian coordinate system, mas malayo yung -5. So basically, dapat it should be -5 yung lower value ng ating lower limit. And then 1 over x dx. Okay, so same procedure lang din. The integral of this would be equal to, or the antiderivative is the natural logarithm of x from 1 to 5. Now, for this case, I mean from, di pala 1 to 5 to, from -5 to -1. Now, for this case, I will not be using the absolute value sign just to give you an idea of how this will work. So if I have the natural logarithm of -1 and then minus the natural logarithm of -5, you might be saying na, this is quite impossible kasi you can take the natural logarithm of a negative number. And that is true if you're trying to perform the operation in each term only, no? Pero what if we try to apply one rule of our natural logarithm, which in this case, if I have the ln of a minus ln of b, I can rewrite that in terms of ln of a over b, which in this case becomes -1 over -5. Okay, and then therefore, finally, we could just say that this is the natural logarithm of 1/5. Okay, and I hope this makes sense now. That in this case, we could say that the value of this expression is ln of 1 over minus ln of 5. I mean ln of 1 over 5, or we could just simply say na this will in turn be equal to the natural logarithm of 1 minus the natural logarithm of 5, which also gives us the value which is negative of ln of 5. Okay, so this expression is somewhat same dito beside the fact na negative yung ating natural logarithm of 5. So how about if you try to incorporating your your absolute value? So in this case, this becomes equal to ln of the absolute value of -1 minus the natural logarithm of the absolute value of -5. So with this, this becomes something like ln of +1 minus ln of +5, which can be regarded as 0, and then this would be your final answer. So I hope that makes sense now kasi we have the same answers for this expression. That's the negative of your value. So if you're trying to perform just this operation, so hindi niyo makukuha yung sagot niyan, kaya you have to apply your ln of a minus ln of b is equal to ln of a over b, or you could just use the absolute value just to modify, or just to take the value that can compromise with the negative symbol. But how about let's say this last letter, which is letter C, for the same integrand. So I have -1 to 5, and then we have 1 over x dx. Okay, now if I try doing this same process, alam naman natin na I have to integrate this. So the antiderivative would be simply the ln of x. Now for this sake, I will not be using the absolute value, just to show you something po na from 1 to 5, and then this, -1 to 5, this will be equal to the natural logarithm of 5 minus the natural logarithm of -1. Okay. Now, if I try to use the absolute value for this expression, this becomes +1, which in turn this becomes 0. And probably you will be saying that there is an answer for this case because you were able to use the absolute value in this expression, and then it becomes 0. But then again, just to show you what is the solution, or the most accurate solution here, it should have been you not using the absolute value. So in general kasi, this absolute value is kind of applicable kung parehas siyang negative on the upper and lower limits. Pero when it comes to a point na negative to isa and then positive yung isa, and then it crosses at a certain point na mamaya ipapakita ko kung ano yon, then yung absolute value natin is not supposedly be used. So in this case, the safest method that you'll be using is that you don't use your absolute value. So ganun lang, wag nyo na lang siyang gamitin just to make it safer sa solution. So in this case, magiging minus the natural logarithm of negative 1. Now, this expression, we cannot find the value for this, diba? Kasi wala hindi natin yan pwedeng i-take ang natural logarithm kasi that's a negative number. So, what is your answer for this case? So, alam naman natin na hindi natin to kayang evaluate kasi wala tayong negative of a logarithmic function. So, in this case, we could say that the integral does not converge. Okay? So, pwede natin sabihin to, hindi siya nagko-converge into a single value. So, pwede nyo lang sabihin na does not converge para madaling para hindi na kayo magsulat ng mahaba. No? You can just say does not converge. But if you use absolute value, then probably you'll be able to get an answer that is the natural logarithm of 5. Now, bakit sinabi ko na mas tama itong does not converge kaysa dito? Una sa lahat, when we try to integrate using the natural logarithm, tandaan nyo, the absolute value is used kapag meron tayong dalawang negative sa limits, and of course, kapag hindi magkocross at a certain point yung ating graph, meaning siya ay continuous dun sa ating interval na yan. Ba't ko ba sinabi yun? Kasi from negative 1 to 5, so graph natin yung ating function. 1 over x can be graphed in this way, no? So, siya is asymptotic sa medyo natin. So, siya is asymptotic sa y equals 0, x equals 0 or the y-axis kasi you can't have any value that is 0, diba? And then, of course, as x increases, the value of 1 over x decreases. That's why asymptotic din siya dun sa ating x-axis. As, of course, x approaches to infinity. So with this, alam naman natin na if we're talking about negative 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then this positive 5 here, and I need to find the area under this curve kasi alam naman natin na, diba, if we're talking about integration, we're talking about the area under the curve. So, I'm talking about this area, okay? So, yung area dyan, okay? Pero, how about the area that will come in contact with this 0? So, you can't actually find that area because if you try to extend your value as it as it approaches to this certain value of your, diba, it is y-axis. So, alam naman natin na yung area dyan is mag-extend yan hanggang doon sa kataas-taasan ng value ng y, as well as this one sa pinakababang portion, ng pinakababang baba. Kasi this is an asymptote. So, basically, the area does not converge, or we could just say that the area is a kind of, infinitely positive for the side of the right side, and then infinitely negative for the left side. Pero syempre, we cannot say for sure na this is more on the positive infinity or more on the negative infinity, simply because yung ating graph is hindi siya nagko-converge in both sides. So we could just say that it does not converge, and we cannot find any exact value. So imagine nyo lang to, basta may asymptote, or if there is any discontinuity dun sa inyong graph in between these two intervals, then most probably hindi siya pwedeng i-integrate or hindi ka makakuha ng exact value. Okay, so that's all for A to C.